I mean, I grew up here in Vegas. Where am I going to go in Las Vegas and not see something that is over-sexualized? People come here to sin.
Yeah,
right?
well, they call it Sin City, right?
They are literally coming here to live out whatever desire that they have. I want to start off with the books. Help us. How do you get to the point where you're like, hey, I need to write?
For an entire year, every time I would drop them off, and as I would park my car and then walk towards the door, I would literally start to cry. And I would beg God, let me have a voice in your kingdom. Let me have a voice in your kingdom. I don't care how small. This is your voice. You're going to tell people about how I helped you win this battle for sexual purity.
Wealthy Kingdom. What's going on, everybody? Thank you for joining us. My name is Chris. I am the leader of Wealthy Kingdom. I host the Wealthy Kingdom podcast. If this is your first time joining us, thank you. I don't know how you ended up here, but I'm so happy that you are here. And I hope this isn't the last time that we get you here, because we really feel like we have something great happening here at Wealthy Kingdom. If you are joining us again and you're like, hey, this is family. This is not my first rodeo with you all. Thank you for coming back. And honestly, thank you for watching, because these are great conversations. I love to be in here, whether it's just me by myself or I have a guest. But honestly, this doesn't mean anything if no one's watching, and you guys are watching. So thank you for coming back, truly from the bottom of my heart. If you guys are a part of our community, there is so much love that we have for you, and there's so many things that we want to do for you, this being one of them, bringing great men and women of God to you so that you can glean from their stories and from their life to be able to say, okay, God, there's more that you can do with me. There's more that I can do as an entrepreneur, as a business leader. Like, you can truly be the center of everything that I have. So thank you all for joining us. Today, I do want to give a special shout out to Phil. Phil is in Wealthy Kingdom. He's known Ryan for a long time. I've got to know Phil over the last year, and our guest today is here because of him. Phil is one of my elder statesmen. I'll share him with the rest of the community, but honestly, I'm going to be a little selfish right now and say Phil is my elder statesman. He is one of my guiding lights, a father in the ministry to me. So I guess I'll share him with you all. But shout out to you, Phil. Thank you so much for everything that you do. But I want to introduce our guest today, Fred Stoeker. Can I give him some tidbits about you?
Go ahead.
Okay, so are you ready? You ready? You guys tracking with me? If you're listening, turn it up a little bit, because you need to know. You need to know the credentials here. So Fred is a best-selling author of the Every Man series, which challenges men to become sexually pure and to reconnect in true intimate relationships with their wives, encouraging them to rise up and be Christians rather than to simply seem like a Christian. He's won 2 Golden Medallion Awards and 2 Silver Medallion Awards for writing excellence. His newest book, Battle On, Battle Over, was written with his wife. Listen, I've done a lot of things with my wife. I don't know if we could sit down and write a book together. Babe, if you're watching this, maybe one day, but I love you. I love you. But he wrote this with his wife, and it's intended to teach husbands and wives how to win this battle for purity together. So make sure that you go wherever you buy books at. I don't know if you're going to the bookstore, if you're good in like downloading stuff, but you need to get those books, get those resources, especially if you're married, especially if you're a man and you're in this crazy world of 2024 and you're trying to live for purity. Like, these are going to be great resources for you. But Fred, thank you.
Chris, it's great to be here. It's great to meet you. And we were just talking about that earlier.
Yes.
And you've got a real light in your eye and a great smile. And
Thank you, sir.
I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah. So I want to start off with the books.
Sure.
Help us. How do you get to the point where you're like, hey, I need to write?
Yeah. Every Man's Battle was kind of crazy. It was my very first book, and it's sold millions, helped a lot of guys get free from sexual addictions. And, it just really was born out of the fact that I was just hooked like crazy on sexual issues and addictions. And, the Lord got to me one day and basically let me know I needed to either drive a stake in the ground and win this thing or quit pretending that I'm some great Christian, because at church I was a superstar. I was teaching a lot of marriage classes. I was kind of the role model for husbands to be like. I mean, it was kind of weird because in my secret life, here I was, sexually sinning left, right, and up through the middle. So he got my attention, and I literally did win this battle. And the wild thing is the first time I taught the things that God had taught me, it was in church on a Sunday morning. I had 50 couples. I was teaching a marriage class. I did not tell my wife I was going to get up and talk about this. And boy, did her hair practically turn white when I get up and start talking about this. But the interesting thing that happened is that over the next 6 weeks, some of the guys that were in that class that morning would sidle up to me in church and say, you know what you were talking about a few weeks ago? That really had an impact on me, really helped me. And so for the first time, I thought, wow, I had something here that, could really help people. And then over time, I would keep teaching on purity, and people would say, you need to write a book, you need to write a book. And I used to think, oh, boy, that's a really nice thing for people to say. It just seemed like flattery to me.
Yeah.
Well, then a pastor at my church said, you need to write a book. And for the first time, I kind of took that seriously. And so I actually began writing a first draft. I sent it to kind of a friend I knew. He's actually more of an acquaintance at the time. His name was Mike Yorkie. And he saw the manuscript, thought he referred to it as good clay, but it needed some work, right? Okay. So he and I began working on it. And before long, it was a manuscript that you could take to a publisher. And the very first publisher we took it to wanted it badly. And so, the rest was history. And since that time, I've written 10, 12 books, I don't know. And the best thing about all of it, Chris, is that I get emails from guys that are, they might say, hey, 40 years I've been stuck, or 30 years I've been stuck, or now I'm finally free. And it's just so exciting to see guys getting free. Up until that point, their sexuality owns them. But then from that point on, after reading the books, then they own their sexuality, and it doesn't choke them. It doesn't wreck their family. It doesn't, they have the opportunity to teach their kids how to be pure. And it's just a fabulous ministry for me.
I want to dive into that, but you said something, and my mind is just like alarms are going off. So you said you wrote the manuscript. You send it over, and Mike says that you have good clay, and you can make it a good work.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
How do you go from, what's that process of going from good? Because I think in my mind, I see Genesis, and I'm like, okay, there's God.
Oh, yeah, I see where you're going.
He has good clay.
Yeah, he did.
And then he creates out of that clay a good work, and he said, oh, that's good. So what was that process of going from good clay to good work?
Well, it was about a 2-year process, I think.
Okay.
Mike, my friend Mike, he was part of Focus on the Family magazine at the time. He was kind of the head of that, editor of that. And we just connected. I don't know how else to say it. We just really connected. And he saw the good clay, meaning that the truth of what I was saying was so real. But because I'd never written a book before, for instance, my story of winning the battle wasn't until chapter 7 in my first manuscript. And the first thing he said was, no, this has to be chapter 1, chapter 2, gotcha. Because people don't want to hear anything you have to say until they first trust you.
Yes.
And so they want to hear your story, all right? And that was basically the process. I mean, he told me a few things like that, so I went in and kind of rebuilt that draft. Then I would send it back to him, and then he would say, okay, so now your book is still great clay, but you're doing too much preaching. You need to make your points through story, not through sermon points. And so he said, think up all of the stories from your life working towards this victory, and just go in and insert them in the places where you're trying to make points about a certain thing. Now do it through story. And so I just took a legal pad, I'm kind of an old school legal pad guy. And I just started writing down all of the stories of my life when it came to the battle for purity. Just one sentence for each story. And then I took the manuscript and walked back into it and decided where each story fit best. And just, so Mike didn't do a lot of that work. He just basically told me this is what has to happen for the structure to be right. And he did do, obviously, some editing at that time. But it wasn't until I restructured it that then he went in and started helping to edit it, because I'm kind of the play-by-play guy, and Mike is more the color commentary guy. So if you know that from sports, and so he made what I wrote sing. Yeah. Okay, and so in the end, just working together, he told me where I was flawed in my structure, but once I had the structure right, it kind of came together real nice.
What's it like? You've experienced this breakthrough that God has brought you through, and you have victory. You're teaching it, but when you start to put that on paper, and you know that God is using you to have a much broader reach through your life. When you're writing and you're going through and reliving those moments, like what are those conversations like with you and God when you're like, I remember you brought me through this and you really want me to share this with people, and someone's going to read this and someone's going to identify with that. Like where is your mind at when that part is playing out?
Yeah, that is not how it worked for me exactly. Here's how it worked for me. I had an experience with the Lord where I just felt like I just badly wanted to tell people about how great he was. And I used to, I know this is going to sound funny. Some people out there are going to understand it, but very few probably. But I used to drop my kids off at church, and my wife, a good husband, driving in, drops them at the door, and then he goes and parks, right? And so I would go park, and for an entire year, Chris, and we used to go to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday nights, sometimes other days. For an entire year, every time I would drop them off, and as I would park my car and then walk towards the door, I would literally start to cry. And I would beg God, let me have a voice in your kingdom. Let me have a voice in your kingdom. I don't care how small, just maybe a little radio show on, that nobody listens to. But I just want to tell people about how great you are and what you've done for me. And so this entire year of just this, and these were tortured prayers. I mean, I'm crying, and then I'd get to the door, and I would just, okay.
Got to get it together. Got to get it together.
Yeah. And for an entire year. And then all of a sudden, he lets me know he wants me. I had that conversation with that pastor, and he basically said, look, this is your voice. You're going to tell people about how I helped you win this battle for sexual purity. And I'm like, oh, brother. I prayed a whole year. Being the sex guy was not what I was expecting, right? But I mean, he had me sold from hello, as the movie says. I mean, I'm just like, okay, I'm ready. And it was the wildest thing. Very shortly after that, I was up in South Dakota at a business trade convention, and they had put the booths with us out where nobody walked. And so I'm just going, this is the most useless trade show I've ever been to. So I packed up. I was going to be there for 3 days anyway. So I just went up to my room and just started typing the manuscript, just started typing the first chapters, 5 of them actually. I finished by the time that trade show was over. And it was just in the wake of the Lord letting me know, you're going to be the sex guy. And, my wife just thought I was a kook. I mean, she said to me, the only reason I let you start writing this is because I knew it would never be published. She said that to me many times.
Wow.
And because she said, Fred, you're nobody. There's no way you can get anything published. You're not a pastor. You don't have a natural audience. You don't have a podcast like Wealthy Kingdom, whatever it might be. I mean, there were no podcasts then, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, the day when Waterbrook Press called us, I can take you right, I-80, just where we are, and said, we want to publish your book. Oh, my word, did she freak out. The next 48 hours was pure disaster because she's like, oh, no, everybody's going to know everything about us now, and had not expected that. And it took her 48 hours of kind of some pretty direct prayer with the Lord. I mean, and he finally got through to her, and she just said, Lord, if this is what it takes, and if people are going to be free now in the way Fred is free, I don't have any right to stand in the way, so I'm in. And so the two of us we went out to Waterbrook Press, we signed the contracts, and the rest is history. But, you were saying, okay, when you're writing and you're saying, oh, Lord, I have to put this on the page. Once I got past that spot where, Lord, I want a voice in your kingdom, he said, okay, this is your voice. This is what you're going to do. I never looked back. I never struggled with what I put down on the page. I mean, it's some pretty nasty stuff on some levels. I mean, not nasty in a dark way, but I mean, 1 year out of college, Chris, I had 4 girlfriends. I was sleeping with 3 of them and engaged to be married to 2 of them. I mean, some guys would say that's the American dream, I suppose. But I mean, I wasn't a Christian yet, but you can see where I started from. Yeah. And so I had some things to share that were very embarrassing. But on the other level, once I made the decision, I'm in this thing, I never looked back. I never had a discussion with God like, hey, do I really have to put this story down? No, I just put it all down. Because Mike said, look, you need more stories. So on the legal pad, every bad story I had, I mean, they went in the book. And the funny thing, Chris, is, your question to me on that is very prescient, really, because what happened is once the book came out, what guys were saying was, oh, man, you were so open, so transparent. I felt like I was reading my own mail. Yeah. And you see, putting everything down was critical because men need to know that I know what I'm talking about. I Correct. Struggled. My sexuality owned me, and I had to find a way to own it.
Did you see, because that happened, what year was that when you published the book?
It was the year 2000. I started writing it in 1997, and then Mike and I started working on it in 98 through there.
From the time you published that book to now, we're 24 years later.
Yeah.
And just where our country, where our world is, where the church is when it comes to purity. Did you ever think like, oh, like this was very timely, maybe even before its time, before we even get to this social media era?
Yeah, like, I have. At the time, you have to kind of place every man's battle in history. And the very first book on sexual addiction wasn't written until 1992, and it was written by Patrick Carnes, Out of the Shadows. It was a secular book. And there had been a few Christian books that were written, but none that were practical, with practical help and how to actually take steps to win. So my book came out really only 8 years after any book had been written on the topic, because it wasn't something that was being written on. And then, of course, once it came out, I mean, Mike, me, publishers, I mean, we were stunned. I mean, after the first 6 months, it was just sort of getting traction, but then it just exploded with men's groups buying caseloads of books, basically, to go through it together, and guys were really wanting to focus on it because people like the guys in my church that were sidling up to me and saying, hey, this helped me. It was helping guys to get free. But then you'll find this story really interesting too, is because, on some levels, the United States just kept getting worse, right? and it's like in 2008, 2009, I had just finished writing. There was a book I wrote with my son called Hero, writing there. And I thought, maybe I'm past my moment. I mean, maybe America has gone in such a rotten, deeper direction that maybe my ministry it's past its time and I need to just kind of forget it, And I was literally out in Colorado, in Pueblo, Colorado, teaching. And after the event was done, there's this guy whose grandfather he was a kid in the Welsh revivals back in when, about the year 1907 or so. And anyway, this guy was a spiritual giant. I could just tell standing next to him. And he started praying for me. And suddenly his voice changed as if it was God speaking to me instead of him.
Wow.
It was wild. It was a Holy Spirit thing. And the guy said, I know what you've been thinking. And I hadn't even told Brenda, okay? And he started saying the things I've been thinking about my ministry, being past it, and this really made me need to just quit writing. And I'm just like, okay, this is the Lord. Because nobody there would have thought that. Because, I mean, I'd had this powerful speaking time for 2 days. And then the Holy Spirit says through him, he says, yes, it's really bad, but I want you to know it's going to get worse, a lot worse. Think about it. Think about what's happened since about 2009 till today.
Yeah.
Transgenderism, I mean, everything
has just become...
just exploded. Pedophilia is everywhere. And he says, will you still go? Okay, so I'm discouraged because things were going in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
He says to me, and by the way, it's going to get way worse, but will you still go for me? I fell to the ground screaming, yes, 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 I'll go, I'll go. All I needed was for him to say, I still need your voice. Okay, and of course, since that time, we've written this new book called Battle On, Battle Over, which this is wild. Okay, so Every Man's Battle, a million seller, right? I had 10 people read my manuscript before it was published. I just wanted them to give me your feedback. All 10 of them said this is not just better, but vastly better than Every Man's Battle. People need the message of Battle On, Battle Over. And so I thought, well, hey, I'm still going, Chris.
Let's go.
And the Lord was really good to give us the material needed in this dark day where it's even worse. He has truths for people that's really going to help them. So, and I'm still going.
Yeah. Oh, well, and you're here. And
I am
I'm happy that you have decided, because you said yes in that moment, even in the midst, like, that's not, we don't want to hear that aspect of it. And like,
no,
it's going to get worse. Wait, what?
I'm already discouraged.
And it's crazy because I think about, so 2008, I graduated from high school.
Mm-hmm.
And women was my thing.
Yeah.
Like, I realized early in like middle school or high school, I'm like, okay, I'm a pretty attractive guy. But then
Yes, you are. Yeah.
Thank you. And then I realized, like, oh, I can talk.
Yes.
And I can talk my way into a lot of things. And so I'm like, oh, really? This is how this works.
Yeah.
And so,
you bad boy.
yeah, I'm like, when you say I had you at hello, I'm like,
Yeah.
I've had several conversations with this woman before she even said hello to me.
Yes.
So I'm not worried about that part of it. I was also a drummer, so that
helps.
That helps a lot. Where you're like, oh, you're the guy, just just do the thing or whatever.
Yeah.
And so 2008, I graduate, and I feel so blessed because my first CD was Michael Jackson's Bad album. My first tape was one of the Jacksons' live albums. And so I got to grow up through, this whole change of having a boombox and the
Yes.
CD player. And then I remember when we first got the internet, and I don't even know how I got exposed to pornography on the internet, but it was there. Like
Yes.
I found it. I don't even
It doesn't
know.
take long.
Yeah, I'm like, and that's early 2000s, and then 2008 I graduate, and so now I'm an adult when social media and the internet is really just like booming.
Yeah.
And it used to, I'm like, yeah, I remember you used to have to go into a store or you'd have to go
Yeah.
like buy something, and now it's just like here.
And that had to be what God meant.
Yeah, I'm like, oh,
It's going to get worse.
it's here. Like,
Right.
I first got exposed to pornography, like not like the HBO kind of deal
Right.
or whatever. Like that was always 10 o'clock, turning the TV off.
Oh,
'Cause
yeah.
there's cartoons are off and there's nothing for you to watch. Like
Right.
you need to turn this off.
No, that's true.
And I just remember like I got exposed through family to pornography, and I was like, oh, I can remember the first day that I watched, and I was like, oh, this is what this is. Like
Yeah.
I knew from conversations, I knew from I was in middle school, so kids,
Yeah.
oh, this is what it is, but to see it, to like visually,
Yes.
like, oh,
That probably was frozen in your mind, right?
I can see it now.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was on accident. I wasn't even looking for it. It just was in the house.
Yep.
And I'm going to play a video game. And it was one of those TVs where, remember when the TVs had the tape player on it?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So I'm turning the game on. I turned the TV on.
And there
and
was
it was a
tape
video
in
in there.
Yeah.
And I just could never unsee it.
No.
And for like middle school through high school, like that would be like a little bit of internet, but that's like you have to go try to find pornography.
Yes, you did. Yeah.
Now it's just like I get into college and I'm like, oh, it's just here.
Yeah.
It's
Everywhere.
there's no escape. There's no escaping this
Yeah.
if you're not looking for it. It's there, and just how that. Oh, it got worse. Yeah, it did.
Well, I was discouraged that, the book had come out, but it hadn't like changed the course of American history. I mean, you know how we can all be, we can think that our one book can have that big of an impact, but it did have that kind of an impact on many individuals and families.
Yeah.
And, God was basically reminding me that I need that voice out there as it gets worse. And I'm not, obviously, Chris, I'm not the only voice out there, but he wants my voice out there, and he wants many voices out there, because right now things are, because of streaming porn is so much more devastating. I mean, you cannot unsee it, right?
Yeah.
What we know from brain chemistry is that when we look at something sensual like that, it's literally frozen in our mind forever by the chemistry involved that's released. Marianne Layden of the University of Pennsylvania is one of the chief, experts on porn and porn addictions. And I remember her saying that before the United States Senate in 2006. They were having some hearings. Senator Brownback at the time from Kansas wanted to know, should we call pornography just another form of free speech, or should it be regulated like drugs? And you're saying 2006, you're saying regulate porn as drugs? I mean, that seemed unheard of at the time. But when you actually start looking at what happens in the brain when we look at porn, and it literally locks that image. Suzanne Summers, I can still see in my mind's eye. And I've had victory over sexual sin for over 30 years, but I can still see her standing in a waterfall in a Playboy magazine naked, from way back then. I can still pull it up if I want to. It's frozen in there.
It's just there.
And so we need to understand that when we're looking at the concept of porn, all right, and being out there where everyone can see it. And we're talking about 5-year-olds, 8-year-olds, seeing porn for the first time on their smartphones. And those images are locked in from the beginning by the chemistry of the brain. And we need to understand this is not just another form of entertainment. This is a devastating change agent to the human brain and to human sexuality that most of us have no idea just how deep that goes. And what I've seen is, and I get emails from guys. I mean, they'll, like you, they'll stumble over porn, but for them, they'll be 9, 10, but it'll be homosexual porn. And it just happens to be their first, and that literally changes their sexuality as they start looking at that because their desires and
from that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because their sexuality really hasn't formed yet, but now it's forming along those lines. Now, I'm not trying to pick on homosexual porn. It could be any kind of porn. But my point is that it's having impact. And, a lot of us will say, well, hey, it's just pictures on paper. Anything I do in the quietness of my own home isn't going to affect anyone. Yes, it is. It's going to affect you, and it's going to warp you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think about, my son is 6, and I just remember it was, when I look back now, it was so easy. Even then, even before the big, before tech just really flew off the rails, it was easy.
Yes.
There was no filter. And I grew up in a Christian home. My family was like, listen, we don't do that. We're not I was educated in what it was, but that didn't stop the easiness of being able to find this was there. I mean, I grew up here in Vegas. So where am I going to go in Las Vegas and not see something that is over-sexualized? There's just...
You grew up here,
I grew up here, and so I'm
that's funny.
That's,
I had never thought about that.
To me, I even feel like when I moved to the South in 2008, when I left and I moved to the South, I could just see just a change in just the places that I've been and how even the towns would, be. And I'm like, yeah, I come from a place of people come here to sin.
Yeah, well, they call it Sin City, right?
They are literally coming here to live out whatever desire that they have. And so now as a father, I'm like, that does weigh on me of I don't want to be the reason my son is exposed in the wrong way.
Right.
But I want to be the reason that my son is exposed in the right way, because he's 6, and I could kind of be like, he's only 6, but I'm like, I kissed my first girl when I was in 5th grade.
Yeah.
That's 3 years from now for my son.
Yeah, I kissed my first girl in 1st grade. So, I mean, you can't be, of course, I'm Fred the nut, but you really can't be too careful. And I've written a book called Preparing Your Son for Every Man's Battle. I've written Every Man's Battle, Every Young Man's Battle, but then I wrote a book called Preparing Your Son for Every Man's Battle. And literally, I wrote that after raising my firstborn son. But because I wrote the book, I got to go through that book with my youngest son because he was the last of 4 and the other son was the first of 4. And the thing that shocked me was just how wonderful it was to have a resource where I could literally go through that book with my son. We called it doing book, and we would go through maybe 3-4 pages a night. And the beauty of going through a book with your son like that is that it's not so much what's in the book that's important. Obviously, that's important because it's talking about the brain and all that. Yeah. But what I found that was most powerful about it was it enabled me to be reminded, okay, son, we're going to read these 3-4 pages. I would read those pages. He would read those pages. Then we would go back to the beginning of those 3 to 4 pages and have a discussion, okay? And as I would read through the first 3 or 4 pages, I would then underline things that reminded me of stories from my own past. Oh, this with Lisa. Oh, yeah, this with... Abby. Okay, and then I would be able to go through with him and share my own stories. And that's the thing that God says in Deuteronomy 6, that we are to, as we walk through our day with our kids, as we rise up, as we go to bed, we need to share our stories, share how we apply Scripture to our lives during the day. Well, most of us never see our sons and daughters during the day because, I'm not, in the old days, I'm a carpenter, so I teach my son how to be a carpenter.
Correct.
We're not with them now. And one of the best ways I found to accomplishing Deuteronomy 6 is to be able to share the stories from my life, the disastrous mistakes I made, so that my kids can hear those stories as we go through the book, and they can say to themselves, I don't want to be like Dad.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to be like God said I should be. And they can begin making decisions to follow God earlier in life than they otherwise would, and they can literally learn how we apply Scripture in our lives on a day-to-day basis as we go through those books. So I do recommend that book to you personally because you've got a young son. Now, I'm not saying you start going through the book with him at age 6, but certainly you want to be sharing your own stories by the time he's 11, 12, 13.
Yeah.
And it helps him to build his defenses before he really gets into the wicked stuff out there,
Yeah, I remember I heard a sermon by Miles Monroe, and he said it, and I just was like, oh my God, I've never thought about it like that. And
What'd
he
he say?
said he was talking about being a virgin and being pure,
Yes.
and why that's important,
Yes.
and how in the church we have not necessarily taught that well. He's like, and I'm paraphrasing, so if anyone knows this sermon, don't come get me. But basically, he's like, we teach people to be a virgin, and you need to. This is it because God says so. He's like, but we never really go in and help them understand why
Yes.
that is a principle of God. Why is that His law? Yes, that's His law. Yes, He's God. Yes, we should just follow it. He's like, but it shouldn't be a blind follow. There are plenty of reasons in Scripture, both just like, hey, don't do this because of this, or just stories of when they didn't, it just went wrong.
Yes.
It's like, it's the whole, oh, why can't men have more than one wife? Well, go in the Old Testament and you look at all of the men who had more than one wife, and you tell me if that's the family.
Well, I have to
that
say,
you
Chris,
want.
it's hard enough to have one, isn't
Yes,
it?
I'm like, have you ever been married before? Did you? And so I'm like,
females are great, but they're different.
and I'm like, man, I remember growing up, I knew, but that didn't stop me from having premarital sex because I never really knew why God wanted. I didn't know what is the blessing.
Yeah, and see, Chris, that's exactly what I'm talking about by going through those books because that's what my sons and daughters learned from me. Why? Okay. I told my oldest daughter, her name's Laura, when she turned 15, we had told her, okay, you get to date when you're 16. When she turned 15, it's like a horse with her hoof, just I can't wait till I'm 16. And it's just like, boy, I've got to do something for her to understand that dating is not just a form of entertainment where you just get to go out and have fun with the guys. And so I began to share with her, okay, so this happened with this girl. And when I would share my stories, Chris, I could still feel the pain of what I went through back then. And I would start crying. And my kids were like, Superman is crying because, they saw me as Superman. And it had an impact on them. But the big thing is the whys would come out. Okay, why you need to be careful on this issue or on that issue. And because if not, this is what happens. Superman cries. And you hurt her. Imagine, and there was this one girl that got up and she pointed down at me screaming and saying, "You're just like all the other guys and you're a loser and get out." And she kicked me out of her house because, my hands were going where they shouldn't go. And I really respected that girl, but I didn't have a dad. I grew up learning about romance from movies, and I just thought that's what you do. And it was so heartbreaking that I hurt her. She was so hurt. I mean, and they need to see the whys. And one of the things we learned early as parents, Chris, is that you don't, I mentioned that, we went to church a couple of times on Sunday, many times on Saturday if there were events, Wednesday nights, family night, all that. And the thing is that, these things, they don't pick up everything through osmosis just by being in the building, right? They don't.
I wish.
Yeah.
I wish.
And so if you're not actively teaching them the whys, like Miles said, I mean, that was a brilliant sermon. It's so easy to just brush it aside when you get into a heated moment with your girlfriend. You're suddenly having sex instead of being a virgin, and you don't even know why you did it, and yet you lost something extremely valuable. Well, you didn't even know how valuable because nobody ever taught you why.
Yeah.
And so what we found, okay, so how did Fred Stoeker with his wife Brenda, raise 4 godly children who were all virgins when they came out of college? Okay, how did Fred do that? I mean, they went to public schools, public universities. It's not like they went to John Brown University and just hid in a hole.
Yeah.
Okay, they went to normal high schools, Iowa State University, Drake University, North Carolina State University. I mean, these are just major universities, but they came out pure. Well, the only way that can happen is if the parents are teaching the whys, not just putting them in church.
Yeah, I think I've come to notice, when it comes to the church, is like there's some fair arguments. We took prayer out of schools and all that. Like I get that, but a deeper part of me feels like we got so lazy.
Yeah.
Where we just wanted to outsource.
I think so.
Our biblical mandate as parents in our house, like it is my job.
Yes.
Not my pastor, not the youth ministry, not teen. Like, no, it is my job as a father to look my son in the eye and say, your purity as a man is valuable. And I feel like we just don't. We stopped whenever it happened, like it just stopped becoming a priority of like, I will not outsource.
And I don't know, when it comes to sexuality, I don't know if it was ever anything but outsourced, because I don't know about you, but my dad, he never taught me anything about it. And when I talk to people about it, they say, well, my dad never talked to me about purity. I don't even know how to do it. And so they just kind of hold back. I can remember, okay, the first night I went up to go through books for the first time with my oldest son, 4 nights in a row, I walked up, peeked into his room. He's in there playing Game Boy or whatever he was playing at the time. And I would just say to myself, he's busy. I'll just do this tomorrow night. And it was because I was chicken. I mean, I literally was scared to death. I don't know how to do this. My dad never did it with me. I've never done it with anybody. Is this even going to work? And so on the 4th night, I finally pushed through, Chris, and the most amazing thing happened. I sit down with my son. I say, son, you're about ready to go through something that's going to change your life, and it could potentially be hard. And he said, oh, yeah, it's called perverty. And I kind of started chuckling, and I said, well, that name is probably better than the real name, but it's actually called puberty. And, it's going to, people are going to break up into cliques, and people are going to be making more fun of each other. It's going to be a more rugged time. And he said, oh, Dad, he said, I am so glad you came in to talk to me about this.
Wow.
Chris, I thought I would fall off the bed. He's sitting on the floor. I'm up in the bed talking. And this is what he said to me. He said, I've been finding it harder and harder to say no to my friends lately. He was experiencing peer pressure for the first time. He's, now into middle school. That's when it really starts. Yeah. And I got tears in my eyes. I was thinking, I stepped into this at just the right time, and I've been scared like a chicken to even do it. But had I not done that, Okay, so I got to be able to start talking to him about those pressures, and I remember talking to him about what it was like, being made fun of, and my son, he can't even imagine that I ever got made fun of. I mean, big old strapping fullback looking guy, but people used to make fun of me for my bowed legs, and I told him they used to call me cowboy and this and that, and I asked him if he got made fun of. And he said, and I expected him to say no, because he's my son. He seems perfect, right? And he said, Dad, I get made fun of every single day on the bus. And I just flipped out. I'm just like, I'm going to go in there. I'm going to take a ball bat in there. You know what I'm saying, right? And finally I said, what do they make fun of you about? And he said, well, they call me Hickey Face. Well, he had this little birthmark here. It kind of looked like a hickey. And it had never, we didn't even see it anymore. He lives with us, right?
You're like, what?
And I mean, the next week we had that thing lasered off. But the other side of it was just what an amazing moment I had with my son, because here's the thing. Sons and daughters, they look at you like Superman, like he can't possibly understand what it's like to live where I live, okay? And we look at our kids as kids. But here's what happened in the aftermath as we kept talking. I was mad, and he could tell I was mad. And he said, Dad, it's okay.
He said, you down.
Yeah, he was. And he says to me, he says, Dad, he said, I've come to understand that everybody has something to be made fun of, and I'm just not going to take part in it. And I remember I instantly calmed way down, and I kind of looked down, and I thought to myself, my son is wiser than I am. Listen to what he just said. And so while he's finding out that Dad knows where he lives, because Dad got made fun of too, I'm finding out that he's not a boy anymore. He's worthy of being a man and being treated like a man. He's wiser than I am. And so it changed us. It changed our communication going through that first book together. It changed our communication forever. And it wasn't even a purity book. It was a book by James Dobson about preparing for adolescence. And our relationship was never the same. I mean, I always saw him as a man from then on, and he was only, I think he was just 11. And then, he knew I understood. Yeah. And he could come to me with anything. And my son and I are so close today. He's 40. So, you kind of look at it and go, and there's that little kid, he's 11. But because of those changes where I was literally having the time and taking the time to go through books, we were he was sharing stories from his life, which I otherwise wouldn't have known.
Yeah.
I was sharing stories from my life, which he certainly would have never known. Why would I ever talk about being called cowboy? Nobody had called me that for years, but it really hurt my feelings back then. And it changed everything. Happened with my daughter Laura, my daughter Rebecca, my son Michael, all of us. It changed us and made us close. And so when it gets into the tight spots in life where should I or shouldn't I, they're saying, my hero, my dad, he would say, no, I better just stand here. And it means something because I've literally formed a true relationship, not just a guy who hauls them around to their practices, but they know me and I know them.
Yeah, that reminds me of, it happened here. If you're the gentleman who I had a lapse in judgment and yelled at, when we were working together, I still apologize for that. That was wrong and super immature of me. So if you're watching or if people know, like, that was not right. That was a horrible moment.
And all the rest of us are saying, I can't wait to hear this moment.
Oh, yeah. So, and I actually could have got fired over it. It's the amount of grace that Ryan had for me. It was a fireable offense. It was. But so I'll start with Xavier. Xavier had been having some problems in school with his temper and things, and it's crazy because he's an AB student, but he was just getting to that age of like, oh, we have to really start working with him on emotions and how to channel
Yes.
being upset and being sad and all these different
And this
things.
is your son, Xavier.
Yes, my son Xavier.
Great name, by the way.
Thank you. And so one day he got in trouble, and he's like, "Dad, did I have a good day today?" And I'm like, "Well, no, not today. You know, you had the majority of the day was good, but you had a moment." And he was really defeated about it. And I told him, I was like, Daddy had a bad day not too long ago. His eyes just.
Isn't it amazing what happens?
He was like, "What? Tell me more. Tell me more." And
Yeah,
he's like,
they think that we can't ever fall across the boundaries and fail.
he was just,
Yeah.
his whole world had just,
Yeah.
okay, so I told him, I had a moment here where I was talking to one of my managers, and he doesn't work here anymore. And I was frustrated with where the business was at. I was frustrated with him and what he had done. And I was just like, today is not a good day for you to have had me in the office to talk about what we're talking about, because today I'm going to let you have it. And I did. I let him have it. And when it was over, I was like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. And I've never had a moment like that here. I hadn't had a moment like that in just life in general in a long time, but I was just very not happy. And it was so, I knew it was bad because Ryan called me. He wasn't even in town. He was like, "Hey, I heard this just happen like 30 minutes ago. Help me understand what's going on."
That was a nice way of seeing it.
Yeah, because he's like, "You've never acted like this. Like, I don't know what's going on, but I want to call you and I want to talk," which is a great testament to Ryan of like really being, and he wasn't like mad or anything. He was genuinely concerned.
A great leader.
And I was like, "I messed up. This is how I'm feeling. This is why. This is where I'm at. And I have genuine concerns about what's going on. That does not take away from I should not have done and said and acted the way that I did." And we talked about it, and I came back to that manager 30 minutes after that and apologized. I apologized to the team, and, you walk through what you got to walk through, and your character takes a hit, and then you got to keep going. But I told Xavier about that. I was like, "Yeah, I had a bad day, and I got in trouble, and I got sent to the principal's office."
Yeah, you
at
did.
Job, and he's like, "Did they call your mom?" And I'm like, "Well, no, they didn't call my mom." He's like, "I'm gonna tell Yaya because they call my mom when I get in trouble." I'm like, I don't think we need to tell. I don't think we need to tell Yaya, but I don't think that's necessary.
I don't know. I think Xavier had a point.
That's it. He was like, "Yeah, I think they call my mom." I'm like, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
We don't have to.
Yeah.
Don't call her. She's okay.
Yeah.
She'll be fine. I'm an adult now. But and he did. He told her. But that just, in that moment, I was like, oh my goodness. He is now, I'm like, Daddy is a good guy and Daddy has bad days.
Yeah.
And you're a good kid and you're going to have bad days.
That helps him.
And now that's even a part, like we're a few years later and he's just like, I had a bad moment today and I'm still a good kid. I'm like, yeah. And he's like, "Dad, did you have a bad day today?" I'm like, I've put together a good stretch, son.
Yeah, good.
I'm okay. We haven't had any more moments, but I do try to find things that I can share in vulnerability, so he does not view me as just I can
Superman.
never have a bad day. Yeah.
They're always going to look at you that way, and it's actually bad that they see you as Superman because they need to understand you as a human being. I'll tell you, it gets even more important then that you've been like doing this on a regular basis when it starts coming to things like sexual purity. Because I remember, my son, Michael, my youngest, I was writing a book and I was just locked in the basement. And whenever I'm not around, I'm kind of the life of our home. I mean, everybody likes hanging out with me and stuff. But I'm locked in the basement. And so it was kind of boring. And so Brenda, Jason was gone, but Michael and Laura and Rebecca, she took to the mall to shop. Mm-hmm. And, when they came back, I could tell they had a good time. I heard the bags hit the floor, so they bought stuff, and And I heard the girls giggling and kind of vaguely heard them running up to the second floor. I'm in the basement, so there's silence on the first floor. And I wasn't paying that much attention. But Brenda later told me what happened when it was just her and Michael. So he comes up behind her, gives her a hug from behind. He wasn't very tall at the time, so he's hugging her around the thighs, right? And head probably up to the waist, whatever. And she turns around. She says, "Well, I love you too, Michael." And he looks her dead in the eye with laser beam eyes, and he says, "Mom, how do you get pictures of women in their underwear out of your brain?" Stunning. I mean, she's just like, I think that's a good question for your dad, right? So
Hold that thought. Exactly. You hold that thought.
I'm saying probably 999,000 out of every 100,000 women would, they do the same thing. But so she said, "Before you go talk to your dad, what women in their underwear are you talking about?" And he said, "Well, we were walking through the mall today. We went by that secret store." Well, he didn't even know it was Victoria's Secret, right? But in the window, of course, you see all these women in lingerie.
Yeah.
Pictures of women in their underwear, right? And he said, "Ever since I looked at those, I haven't been able to get those pictures out of my head all day." And we go back to what we said earlier, freezes the image in your brain, right? He'd never experienced that before yet. You can imagine being a young man in this day and age with so much stuff out there to look at. So he comes down to me, and he starts talking about the secret store, and I'm just immediately knowing what that is, And I said, "Oh, son, it's no big deal. Let me just explain what I do." And so immediately, Dad understands, right? We had already created this great ability to communicate through going through books, so it's not a big deal for him to come down and talk to Dad. And I said, when I go through the mall, I know where that secret store is, so I immediately begin looking the other way as we walk by it, and I just never look in there. I call that bouncing my eyes away. I just bounce my eyes away from that window, and I never have to deal with it.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Oh, I'm going to start doing that." And he has. I mean, he's never had that struggle again. And there's been other moments like that with him where, we'll be lifting weights and some girls with nothing on will come in and pretend they're lifting weights and just, giggling.
I love it.
You know what I mean?
I love it.
But we walked out of there one day and I said to, he said, "Dad, I really don't think women should be allowed to lift weights." And I laughed, and he said, "Well, it's not that they're not athletes too." And I said, "Yeah, I know. It's because of what they were wearing, right?" And he said, "Yeah, don't they understand what that does to us?" By this time, he's now 14. At that first conversation I just had with you was about when he was 11 with the secret store.
Or a few years away.
Yeah. And so he's saying, don't they understand what they do to us? And I said, "Well, sometimes they do and sometimes they don't, but the big thing is what we do." So I said, what I've learned in these battles, Michael, is that you can't lust with your peripheral vision. So I said, we're going to use our peripheral vision as our weapon here. And when you're lifting, I'll keep them in my peripheral vision and kind of keep my back to them so we kind of know where they're at. Mm-hmm. And then when you get up, it'll be my turn to lift and you keep them. And then we can just kind of keep our backs to them and just do our thing and be on our way.
Right.
And he said, "Okay." And then he was silent. We got into the car, threw our gear in, headed home. It's about a 10-minute drive, about halfway there. He said, "Dad, thank you for telling me about peripheral vision. I would have never learned that on my own." And you see, Chris, when we are raising our sons and daughters to be pure, we must have open communication lines built through going through books or whatever, you sharing the story about your bad day, right? We have to get to the point where when they are shocked by something like the secret store or the girls in their, wife beater shirts and falling out all over the place. I mean, they need to be able to come and talk, and you need to be able to share your actual strength in the battle
Yeah.
So they can understand what works. You teach them, and then they can, then it's not like what some people say is, asking a young man to white knuckle his way through high school and college and to stay sexually pure. That's not very loving. I mean, that God would never ask that of a guy. Well, he would ask that of a guy and has asked that of us guys.
Yeah.
And excuse me, so what we need to be able to do is share what works in the battle so that they don't have to go through this alone. And the truth of the matter is, if we do that not just with our sons, but in our small groups, in our men's small groups, we need to be able to be men that are open enough and not living in secrecy about all of our sin. We need to be open enough to be able to share what's working and say, come on, let's shoulder to shoulder go win this thing together. And that's where life becomes true life, where we're loving our brothers and sisters in Christ and I think living the lives that Paul and John and Peter all said we're supposed to love and live in unity and live in sexual purity. I mean, those are the three main points of the New Testament. If you go back to the New Testament, just go back to the New Testament sometime, just read it through 6 times in a row. Those are the three things that it presses. Okay, love each other, have unity, be pure. That's the three main drives of the New Testament, and we can't do that if we're living in secrecy and hiding ourselves.
Yeah, I think about all the guys that I call brothers.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I can call him, and it's a couple weeks ago I go to Target. I don't like to go to Target for a few reasons. One, because you always go in there, and then when you're leaving out, you're like, I needed one thing, and this bill says it's $100. What did we buy? 2, because I get yelled at when I go to Target without my wife, because
She wants to go.
she wants to go, which
Yeah.
then takes me back to step 1. We're right at $100, and I don't
Yeah.
understand why.
Yeah.
And I'm in Target. I am going to get shampoo. That's it.
Okay.
All I'm doing is going to get shampoo.
$5? Whatever.
Pretty simple.
Yeah.
I feel like every beautiful woman in Las Vegas decided that they wanted to go to Target that day after work.
Oh,
This
yeah.
doesn't even
Yeah.
make sense. I'm turning around the corner. I'm like, oh, we're going over here. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. And my buddy called me, and he's like, hey, man, what's up? I was like, God knew. He knew
Yeah,
that
he
I
needed
was
you
in
to
a
call.
moment where I'm like,
Yeah.
I am not trying, but I'm struggling right now because they're everywhere. I'm trying to, there's another one. And he was like, you good? I'm like, yeah, I'm good. And he's like, so you're not, did you stare or did you just look? And I was like, I'll be honest with you, man. There's a little bit of staring going on there.
Yeah, there you go.
And he's like, okay, stop going to Target. You can order on Amazon. It'll come to the house. And we laughed about it, but it was good to be like, I could tell another man, like, there's beautiful women in the world. And I saw them and I was attracted. And I didn't have the strength in that moment to be like, oh, I see, and then move on. Like, I stared.
Yeah.
I didn't honor God. I didn't honor myself. I didn't honor my wife. I didn't honor that woman in those moments. And he's like, okay. So just so you, like, we're not going to be on guard next time. And it's not that woman's fault that she's beautiful. Like,
No.
that's my fault that I didn't have self-control.
I've always said that.
It's like, that's not, I'm not going to not go to Target anymore, but it was good to know, like.
Yeah, I've always said that I feel like in the Middle East, they do it wrong. They take their beauty and put covers over it.
All over it.
And the men don't have to have any responsibility. I think God intends for us to take responsibility. He makes a beautiful woman. We're supposed to treat her with absolute purity, including the way we look at her.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the accurate biblical way of doing it. But the great thing about this story, and this will make a great story for Xavier someday, right?
Yeah.
You tell him the Target story.
Yeah.
When he asks you about his time at Target, right?
It's like, son, right here. She's coming up. I already saw her right here, son. Right here. Don't move. Don't move.
Yeah.
We're just going to walk. And I like that you refer to it as like our daily battle, because it is. It's a warring of like, am I in this moment going to decide to be Christ-like in my purity, even as a married man.
Yeah.
Like I still have an obligation to be pure.
Oh, an even bigger obligation, I suppose you could say. Yeah. Because she's counting on you. I mean, in 1 Corinthians 7, the Bible talks about the fact that, in my case, Brenda's sexuality is not hers alone, it's also mine. And my sexuality is not mine alone, it's also hers. Yeah. The truth of the matter is, since she owns my sexuality like I do, I really can't look at porn without asking her permission first. I really can't look at that girl at Target and lust after her without asking her permission first, because that's all part of Brenda's ownership of my sexuality, right? Wow. Have you ever thought of it that way?
No.
No, but it's true. And the fact of the matter is that the more I see my sexuality as ours, the easier it is for me to do everything right. And, you know, Brenda, of course, she's never struggled with any of that. I mean, she came out of 4 generations of great Christians, not just average Christians, but great Christians. So, I mean, she kind of grew up pure and kind of doing everything right. And it's kind of irritating on some levels, right? I mean, you're happy for your kids' sake because they have this wonderful mom, but there are times where I feel like, ooh, I'm kind of a dark horse next to this woman. And she's taught me so much about Christianity. But she's really happy that I see it the way the Bible sees it, that I really can't make those decisions because she owns my sexuality. And I'll tell you the truth, where this really came in really big back when we first met each other, because at the time I was looking at porn regularly, okay? I'm a Christian, but, you know, like so many of us, not applying God's word at all. And so as then we get engaged, and listen to this thought process. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking to myself, okay, I spend my money on pornography. I go into stores, buy the magazines, right? Pretty soon I'm going to be married, and there's not going to be any such thing as my money. It's our money at that point. Do I have a right to take Brenda's money to buy pornography? Interesting. Okay. And do you know what happened? I mean, so I'm only partially a good guy, but I literally stopped looking at porn before we got married. And I'm one of the few guys, I'm sure, in America that can say, since my wedding day, I've never purchased pornography or looked at it. But it wasn't because I cared about purity. It was because I cared a lot about stewardship, and I knew I couldn't take her money and spend it on that. But it's still noble, and it's still a good thing. But it's that whole mindset of the things that are ours, then I can't be deciding to do things without asking. You know what I'm saying?
Wow. That is another level of...
I hope it stretches you.
Yeah, because that's like... I go back to the Target story.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be like me coming around the corner. I'm looking. I see this woman. She's beautiful. I get on the phone. I call my wife and I say, "Hey, so there's this beautiful woman that's right here. You mind if I just like stare at her real quick? Because I like the way she's built.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I just like what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
Is it all right if I just go back around? I don't need anything on that aisle, but I want to walk right back around and just
and walk up behind her and stare.
Take a little look.
And
then I'll get my stuff and I'll check out. Is that all right? The practicality of that in my mind is like, Target would be... She'd call in a nuclear strike. And
You'd be sleeping on a couch for quite some time, right?
I'd be like, no way.
Yeah, nuclear strike. That's funny. Call it in.
Yeah, call it in. Blow it up. But I'm here too. Don't worry. You'll be fine.
Yeah, but see, the thing is, that's how God sees it. And so we can say, what would that be like to call my wife? But the truth of the matter is, that's how God sees it. And you have to remember, yes, you are a son of the living God, okay? You're his son, adopted son, right? But in another sense, you're married to his daughter, which makes you his son-in-law. And let me ask you, do you have a daughter?
No.
Okay.
Not yet.
I do. all right? And I would not like it to know that my son-in-law is, is looking at other women after promising to be married and to give his sexuality just to my daughter, okay? And you have to understand that's how God's looking at it, because you're not just his son, you're also his son-in-law. And he's going, okay, I raised up your wife. Okay, what's her name?
Jasmine.
Okay, I raised up Jasmine to be a pure girl. I love her with everything in me. If she was the only sinner on earth, I would have sent Jesus to die for her. That's how much I love her. And you're staring at somebody else's back end? I think we need to just be a little more practical. Yeah. Now, we have to understand, sure, okay, grace, the grace of God. He forgives us. Okay, he does. He forgives you immediately for in fact, he probably knew ahead of time you were going to look, so he forgave you before you got to Target.
Here
right?
he goes.
Yeah.
Going to Target.
Yeah, here
Amazon.
Goes,
I created Amazon.
Here
he
goes
is
Chris.
Going to Target.
But the fact is that, we, even though he's given us grace, the Bible says, I think it's in Titus, where it says, the grace of God appeared to bring salvation to all people. But what does it go on to say? It goes on to say, grace, it teaches us to say no to ungodliness and worldly passions. And later in the passage it says, it makes us eager to do the right thing. Okay, so even though we have the grace that God says, okay, I'm going to forgive you because I love you, all right, my grace was given to you not just for your salvation, but to teach you to say no to those things and to even be eager to do the right thing. That's when we have to look at grace again in a more accurate way. Because a lot of times, I saw a guy this was on a dating site, and he said this to a girl. He said, you don't understand grace, or you would be willing to sin. He's trying to manipulate her into having sex, right?
Yeah.
All right. That's the exact opposite of what I just told you from Titus. I mean, what he was saying is, look, you don't understand grace, or you would go ahead and have sex with me. Not what God said was, no, grace is to make you eager to not have sex.
Yeah.
Right? Eager to do good. Does that make sense?
It does, and it's convicting. We'll just be honest. It's convicting because I would be lying to you if I said right now, I wake up and I always have, because of grace, that my response is an eagerness to do good. I don't always have that. I still have the eagerness to do wrong, and it's for me, like, just being transparent. It's not even because of I have grace. Like, that's not even the thing. It's just the desire to not do good in whatever context that may be.
Yeah.
Like, in my mind, I desire to not do good.
Yeah.
Not as a response to grace. I know I can come back to Christ, but like the convicting part for me is like, oh, you're not even considering that you have grace for salvation and forgiveness. You just want to go do bad.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
some of these scriptures, so you go online. I have two daughters that go on these dating sites, and some of these guys say some of these creepy things to them personally. The one I just said was someone else, it wasn't my daughters. But when you actually look at what guys are saying on dating sites, the lack of a biblical knowledge is horrendous. I mean, they either don't know or they're pretending they don't know. I don't know. I'm pretty sure they just don't know. I'm pretty sure that guy was saying, look, if you understand grace,
then you just go sin.
Yeah, you should go to bed with me, right?
Yeah, like you're going to just ask for forgiveness tomorrow anyway. So.
Right. And so what I'm finding is that evidently guys aren't reading their Bibles. Because when you run across a verse like this in Titus, you just, oh my word.
Yeah, I'm like, when was the last time I read Titus?
Yeah, you talk about...
I didn't see that one.
Yeah, but you talk about conviction. And when he goes on to say, not only am I, or you should be like saying no to worldly passions.
Yeah.
You should be eager.
To get away
two
from
sentences
it.
later, it's
Yeah.
like, oh my word. And so it's the kind of verse that you want to memorize. It's the kind of verse that would change the whole entire conversation between men and women on dating sites if they would actually read it and apply it.
Look, I'm gonna have to go call my wife and be like, I have not been eager for the sake of our marriage. I have not been eager to chase good and not chase bad in every aspect like I should.
Yeah.
Like that's the truth. That's
Yeah.
not even like I'm just trying. It's like, no, in this moment, I'm like, me and my wife have this thing. We say where we don't trust that we would never do things that would dishonor our marriage. We trust that you would never put yourself in a position to have to make a decision, to make the choice.
Yeah, that's a better place to be.
Like I would never cheat on my wife. I don't want to be in the position to have to make a choice of cheating on my wife or not cheating on her.
Right, you don't put yourself
Let's
there.
just not go there, and then we
Exactly.
don't have to answer because I don't know if on that day if I'm gonna be strong enough to say
Yes.
no.
That's just wisdom.
Yeah, and so I'm like, wow, I'm not honoring that vow that we made between each other because by not chasing good, I am willfully placing myself into positions to have to make decisions about honoring or dishonoring my wife, dishonoring my children, dishonoring God at the
Yeah.
end of the day. And I'm like, oh, I'm not, okay, God, I'm sorry, because I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
I should be, and even if it's just a fleeting thought, in my mind, I have already chosen evil in some of those situations, whereas I should have chose good.
Yeah. You should have been eager to choose good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, that's really, Chris, I know we haven't talked much about this, the purity part of it, but that's really one of the reasons why I wrote. I mean, we started off on this, and this discussion has gone in a great direction. I absolutely love the direction it's gone. But, we were talking about purity and, my life and where those books came out of. And the entire process of writing Every Man's Battle and then this newest one, Battle on, Battle Over, is to give guys the chance to really think through some of these scriptures in the Bible that are, basically saying, in 1 Thessalonians 4, where God says, it is God's will that you should avoid sexual immorality, that you should learn to control your body in a way that is holy and honorable, not in passionate lust like the heathen who don't even know me. For you are called, God calls you not to live an impure life, but a holy life. Okay? And a lot of us, if we're reading our Bibles at all, we'll read that, but we won't really spend enough time understanding what that means. He says to learn to control your body. That means something.
Yeah.
See, that means that God understands you're not going to be able to do this by next Tuesday. This is a learning process, which means what? You're going to fail a few times as you learn. But my goal is for you to be sanctified and to avoid sexual immorality. That's my will for you. He literally says it that way. God's will for you is to do this, right?
Yeah.
And I really feel like, and Mike and I both felt like as we were writing this book, that it's important in Every Man's Battle and then in Battle on, Battle Over to lay these scriptures out clearly and to get you thinking about what they really mean, like you're saying, okay,
Yeah.
Grace means I'm supposed to be eager to do good. That's not who I am. Well, it's okay for now that that's not who you are. We're all growing constantly, right?
Yeah.
But it's not okay if 5 years from now you're still the same, right?
Fred,
Still not eager.
still not eager.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, and so we wrote Every Man's Battle so that guys could get eager to be free. We wrote Battle on, Battle Over so that husbands and wives would get eager to work together to win this purity battle. Because really, I was telling Ryan this earlier, that what we have found through the years, and I wouldn't have known this when I wrote Every Man's Battle, but I certainly know it now, and so I could write it in Battle on, Battle over, but because I've done a lot of counseling of guys through the years, and this is what happens. If a wife will join us in the counseling, me and the guy and his wife joins us, I have almost 100% success rate in getting the guy free from porn addictions.
Wow.
Yeah. But if she says, this is his problem, he's kind of a pervert and I don't even want anything to do with it. And so he's trying to fight the battle on his own, and she's not learning about the triggers, learning about, how men are built and all this. I probably 40% success rate. And so what I've come to, our original book was Every Man's Battle. I pretty much now see it as every couple's battle, because when you get married and you're a team and you begin working on this together, it literally changes the intimacy level you have together. And some of the things that trigger sexual sin, once the wife is connected in this battle with her husband, those things don't trigger the sin in the same way. There's more intimacy between them, and there's more of a team spirit between them, and the success comes. And so I guess when I bring up Titus, it reminds me that, hey, a lot of us, we don't catch the full vision of what God has. And so one of the reasons why I write is that I did catch the vision of what he wanted as a young man. I didn't believe I actually would win, but I was hoping that I would learn enough in the battle that I could help my son win someday, right? I mean, that's literally what I thought. But then against all odds, I won because God is powerful, and I'm not, but he is. And then the glory of life without porn and without staring at every woman that walks by who bends over to put her kid in the car seat and I'm staring at her rear end. I mean, that's it. That's awful. I mean, why am I lusting over some woman I don't even know? And so as you get those things out of your life, Chris, that's when everything changes. I mean, your wife starts looking more beautiful than you've ever seen. Your connection is more holy than it's ever been. And you can begin to believe that, hey, I can probably raise a pretty Christian family with kids that are more godly than I ever dreamed of being, where my ceiling becomes their floor. They can start at a higher place.
Yeah. I love this conversation. Thank you. I tell people all the time, like, this is one of the biggest blessings for me.
Yeah.
To be able to sit down with people, because it becomes like I'm taking notes. This is my my moment for God to download just as much as it is for someone who's listening. And I'm just thinking about, like, okay, my marriage, and I have to do better, but there are so many strengths together.
Oh, yes.
That we're not even tapping into.
Yeah.
Because we don't have a cohesive strategy for how to want to
That's true.
enjoy and desire to do good together.
Yeah.
Like, she's doing it, I'm doing it, and there's the normal overlap, but I'm like, but God, are we, if I'm having to ask the question of, are we maximizing us? Are we maximizing, I'm thinking Genesis, like, Eve is Adam's helper.
Yeah.
Am I even maximizing my helper?
Probably not. And, if you look at the original Hebrew, that means side-by-side partner. And so it takes helper to an even better level, because she's created to help you, yes, but she's created to be a side-by-side partner in building every last thing in your family. And I have, and don't let me forget, I have a copy of Battle on, Battle Over that I want to give you, because I think she'll really like that section. My wife, I pretty much wrote the first half of the book, but then the second half, Brenda pretty much wrote. And she's writing to wives to help them know how to be the best side-by-side partner they can be in building a pure home. You'll like it.
Yeah,
I'm not saying
Thank you.
you read the first half, she reads the second half. You should both read both
We're reading
halves.
it together. We're reading it together. She's always asking me for like, so are we gonna, we're gonna study together? And I'm like,
Oh, this would be a good one.
I'm like, I mean, yeah, we can. It's so funny because like
You're such a man.
she'll want to study together.
Yeah.
And I'll be like, okay, but she hits me at like weird moments. So we'll be sitting in the
and then you're
bed,
just like, of
and
course
she's
not.
reading her Bible,
Yeah.
and then I'm like vegging out on like YouTube or something.
Yeah.
She's like, hey, she asked me the other, she's like, have you ever read Revelations chapter 3? Revelation? No, I mean, yeah. But
I'm
like,
looking at this Corvette here. What are you talking
she's
about?
like, so the churches, he says
Yeah.
the angels of the house. I'm like, the scripture you decided. Matthew, I'm in.
Yeah,
John,
I get it.
I'm
Oh, I
there.
see what
Acts,
you're saying.
I'm
Yeah.
there. Revelation is
Yeah.
what you decided.
That we are going
9
to go
o'clock
through.
at night is
Yeah.
what. Why are you reading Revelation? I
Yeah.
can give you several others, and so it's like that's one of the last times that she just kind of randomly is like, "Hey, do you know what this scripture means?" But to have resources, I cannot think of the name of the book. We have couples that'll come to our house and they're like, "Hey, we just got married, we're having problems," or they'll be like, "Hey, we've learned." We started telling people at church like, "Stop sending people to our house," because they'll hear another couple talk about like, "Oh yeah, we went and sat on the Lee's couch. Y'all need to go sit on the Lee's couch." And I'm like, "Who told you to come sit?" And so then
Yeah.
we start doing our guesswork.
Yeah, call in one of those
Yeah, we're
nuclear
like-
strikes again.
Like,
right?
who did
Yeah.
y'all tell? Yes. Who did y'all tell to come? But we love it. And there's a book that we always have them go through together, and it's got a workbook and stuff. And so we love doing things like that because
course.
it helps. I learned in our marriage, it's so much easier to start a conversation by saying, well, this book said.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So
no, I
it's
agree.
not I said, it's not you said. We can read something together.
Right.
And then we can discuss based off of what we've just read. It breaks the ice. There's no like, well, I'm
Yes.
telling you, you're telling me.
Yes.
And so I love that because it maybe that doesn't work for everyone, but it truly helps us to
Right.
sit down and be like,
It's
you
a
know,
good
this
model.
made me do this or think this or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, well, it's no different from doing book with your kids. I mean, that's essentially the same thing.
Yeah. It leads to that breaking the ice.
Yeah.
Oh man, I've got questions galore, but on purity,
Yeah.
what should the church do to better teach purity? And not like I mean, you can answer it however, but I in my mind, I kind of feel like we want to do the Sunday morning purity sermon. And I'm like, I guess there's a place for that, but this has definitely been a process.
Yeah.
This is the Monday through Saturday when
Yeah.
you're not here. Like, what can the church do to better address purity that does facilitate conversation and facilitates wanting to take grace to that? I want to do good.
All right. Well, okay. So, chapter 11 in Battle on, Battle Over is going to be a great chapter to read in answer to that question. But I'm going to actually talk about that right here because I believe that sexual impurity is the biggest catastrophe in any church, any Christian church, Western Christian church, whatever you want to talk about. Mm-hmm. So here's the deal. I was talking to a pastor, just a great guy. I'd gone to his church to speak, and something really weird happened when I walked into their foyer the first day. Because I have to tell you, when I go places to speak, I'll walk into a church, and it's like guys think I can read their sins on their forehead. Oh, here's a guy that wrote Every Man's Battle, and oh, my word, he's going to know everything I've ever done. I can't read. Listen, Chris, I'm looking at your forehead.
You can't see it? You
no
can't
words.
see it?
No
It's
words.
not glowing? Okay.
It doesn't say adultery, or it doesn't say he looked at porn at 11. Whatever. I don't know what they think, but when I walk into churches, people are friendly, but they're kind of withdrawn.
Yeah.
Right? I walked into this church, Chris. These men walked up to me, chests out, just manly men, and they didn't have a bit of shame. They didn't feel a bit of guilt or nothing. And they were just as friendly as could be, put their arms around me. And I just, it was just so weird. And so I asked the pastor afterwards, so I spoke, and actually that particular event, Jason came with me, and he spoke on purity too, and how I taught him and all. And so I asked the pastor, I said, look, what in the world has happened to the men of this church? I mean, and I explained what I experienced. He said, it's so great to hear you say that. Because he said, when I first started being a pastor at this church, we had one campus and we had 500 people. And he said, there were so many times I would ask the men, hey, would you guys help me? I need Sunday school teachers. I need guys to go on missions trips. I need guys, they would help if it had to do anything with tools, like if, to help change the oil of the single mom's cars on a Saturday morning or whatever. But he couldn't get them to literally be leaders. And he could not understand. He even went to their tithing records, which I found amusing, because he knows that you're not going to tithe to a church if you don't believe in their direction. And so all these guys were tithing, all of his men. I mean, it was healthy in every way, but people wouldn't step up. And he went into an extended period of prayer, and what he felt like the Lord told him was that it's because of their sexual sin. They are self-disqualifying themselves from being a Sunday school teacher, and this is what they're saying to themselves. They're saying, if I become a Sunday school teacher, I'll get closer to the pastor, and he'll figure out that I'm not as spiritual, and that maybe he'll find out even that I've been paying for prostitutes or, all the different things that guys can do. And so what he felt led of the Lord to do was to take every man's battle and to take 7 guys, so him and 7 guys, and go through every man's battle with them. And the first time first day, I mean, he was saying, the first thing he did was, of course, go first and say, look, I struggle with this too. And they were just like, jaws dropping off their heads. Not the pastor, right? Yeah, he said, when I walk into a gym and they're all wearing tight yoga pants, I mean, I have to turn my eyes away and this and that. So anyway, he took them all through. And a couple of the guys then said, look, we want to lead a group now too. And so pretty soon it was 3 groups. Pretty soon it was 12 groups. Pretty soon they had 40 to 50 groups going on at the same time as their church grew. But at the time, there were only 500. But he said it was remarkable, the change that happened, because as these men, as the shame was taken away, and as they were sharing their secrets, and now their secrets were out in the open, these guys began to step up. And they weren't just to be ushers. They were to teach Sunday school and to go on missions trips. And he said it was an amazing thing, because he says as a pastor, and I didn't know this, but he said that church growth depends entirely upon how many leaders you can raise up, okay? And because one whole gender was self-disqualifying themselves, the church became mostly female-dominated, and the men weren't part of things. He said, suddenly, the men were part of everything. Yeah. And what happened was their church began to grow like a weed, okay? Because he said what happens is that guys, they'll go to church and it's kind of feminized, but at their church it's not. I mean, he's saying, hey, we're all going to go down to the Amazon and we're going to go on this missions trip and grow beards for a week, and we're going to take, this place for God's kingdom. And guys can really warm up to that. They're going, yeah, let's go.
Beard?
Yeah.
Take the Amazon? Yeah. I knew I was built for this.
I'm in.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so their church now is up to 8 campuses, I think 10,000 people.
Wow.
And I asked him, I said, okay, well, what else did you work on to make this happen? He said, nothing. It was all the purity. And once the men began to get free, they began to step up into leadership, and it just exploded. And okay, sexual purity determines the destiny of the local church in many ways. And when you look at his testimony, you kind of understand why all of a sudden. Because if you really do need, you really need two things. You need to, first of all, be guy friendly. Yeah, take the Amazon, let's go.
Yeah.
Take this city, yeah, I'm in. Okay, that's one thing. But the other thing is they need to feel like they don't have to self-disqualify. And what he says he hears all the time is people will walk into his church and they'll say the same thing I say. They'll say, what's with your guys? Your church parking lot is filled with guys. And they're all out being friendly and helping with parking. They're just everywhere being friendly. And that's what I experienced when I walked in. They're just like, and a couple of the guys that greeted me that morning, Chris, later on we were talking testimonies, and a couple of those guys weren't totally free of their sexual sin yet. It's not like they were all just totally free, but the shame had been taken away. The guilt had been taken away because they had become open and they were on their way to victory, even though they weren't there yet. And that's important. And here's what I hear when I go around. So many pastors will say, oh, well, we can't talk about this. We can't talk about this. The women will go crazy. The 80-year-old grandmothers will go crazy. We can't talk about this. But what this pastor said was, okay, the biggest issue facing your men in their world today, you're not going to address it? You're kidding. You're kidding. And he said that we have to address it because that will attract men to not our church, but to Jesus Christ. And that's what our call is.
That is the answer is like, oh God, just tell me that we just need to have another men's barbecue. Tell me we need to have another men's barbecue. Tell me we need to have another men's barbecue.
Hey, I'm in.
That doesn't help our church?
Yeah.
What? Purity. Can we do a pancake breakfast once a month?
No, I get
Can
it,
we
Chris.
It's not the answer we want.
No, but the pastor said this to me. He said when he started leading that group, and then they went to that next level where there were 3 groups, he required every one of his pastors on staff to be in those groups. He wanted his men to see that the pastors struggle too, and that it's a requirement that they be. And do you know, eventually, they made it a requirement to even be a member of their church, that you first have to go through an Every Man's Battle seminar, or whatever, small group, because he said he doesn't want male members that are self-disqualifying all the time. That's even bigger, if you think about that. That's pretty major.
Yeah.
But does it surprise you that they're now at 8 campuses and 10,000 people? No, because people, their basic, most awful sin is being removed from their lives, and they're happy. Those men are happy up there. Gosh, they treated me and my son like we were kings. And of course, it's my book, so they especially are want to get to know me and stuff. But they were all around Jason going, just wanting to see what this great side is. This is the son of Fred, and what's he like? And it was just an amazing time.
That, we always think about, me and Ryan have talked about it, like, okay, so the local church is God's plan A. And we got to make sure that, like, Wealthy Kingdom, even when we're talking about the Bible studies that we start nationwide, like, we are not here to replace the church at all.
No, of course not.
We're like, if we can help these business leaders and entrepreneurs actively get involved in their faith, the church that they go to is going to get a better leader. They're going to be better husbands, better fathers, all these different things. And, like, just listening to that, like, we're not a church, but I do feel like part of our obligation is to
yes, it is.
Help.
I know where you're going.
Help men.
Yes.
Because if the pastor needs that for the church, then what does the business leader need when he's out in the world?
Oh, yeah.
If he's free of these issues, if he's working towards living free with Christ in these issues, that's going to change the very dynamic of the workplace, of their office, the women who come through, the men who come through. Like, that's revival to me.
Oh, yeah, it is revival. And, you asked a fabulous question when you asked that question about the church. And when you started to ask that question, I'm like, oh, Chris, you're great. Because I couldn't wait to share the testimony of that church. Because honestly, you are seeing it in a way I haven't seen it. Yes, in a marketplace ministry like yours, same thing. In fact, of course, you saw it instantly because you're right in the middle of Wealthy Kingdom.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of it, but this is brilliant of you, really. I mean,
Phil saw it. Phil Point, one of
did he? Okay,
Phil,
that doesn't surprise me.
One of
either.
the first, he was like, Chris, marketplace ministry and getting men to be free he's like, there's a lot of work to be done there, but it's good work that is worth doing.
Oh, yeah.
And we need to push it.
That's an understatement.
And I'm like,
worth doing.
Yeah. And when you said that and just the testimony of that church, I'm like, could you imagine?
No,
I get to the point
can't.
of like, could you imagine if I don't know if Mark Zuckerberg is a believer or not, if he gave his life to Christ and then odds are he deals with this in some way.
Yeah.
Especially being at the level of he is.
Yes.
And then God redeems his heart and his mind to be biblically pure. I don't even know if he's married or not. But how just people would be like, Facebook has something a little different going on.
Yes.
Like, oh, well, we talk about these social media companies and these different things of like, oh, they won't take accountability for porn and for and the things that are shared. It's like, if their mind was renewed and they had the mind and the heart of Christ to do good as a response to the grace that they have received, we wouldn't have to legislate it. It would just naturally happen because
Beautiful, Chris.
they would say, oh, we have an obligation to do good on our platform.
Yes.
If we can talk to
And
these
they would
influencers.
Eager to do it.
Eager to do good.
Yeah.
Where they say, you know what? I know it makes me trend online if I share these types of pictures, but I won't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Because I'm eager to do good.
Yeah.
We don't have a choice. We have to.
No, it's a lot like what you said earlier. I mean, some of the decisions Ryan has made that, seemed visionary and has sort of stretched you, but you really had no choice. And every last one of them have been successful. Okay. The fact that something stretches you doesn't mean it's going to be bad.
Yeah.
It probably means that it's going to be good because God's ways are higher than our ways and his thoughts are higher than our thoughts. So practically anything he guides you to do is going to stretch you, but it's going to go in the right direction.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just think about because the majority of our demographic is men, just naturally because they follow Ryan. So I'm like, oh, they all need it.
Yes.
All of them. Every last one of them.
Can you imagine if all of them took battle on battle over, read that testimony, and then moved into Brenda's section of the book where every couple's challenge starts to be built into every one of those marriages, even though it's the men following here. But if you could get them to go through that book, say, with the wives so that all of their families are healthier. Oh, my word.
Yeah.
Because
then
that is revival, isn't it?
I care less about I care about the business of Wealthy Kingdom, right? Like we want that to be
you should.
great.
You're a leader.
Yeah. Ryan, I'm leading your company. I don't care if it does well. I care about that, but I care more about the individual who is saying, yes, I want to be a part. And yes, I want to have a Bible study, or yes, I want to come to a wealth con, or whatever the case may be. It's like, if that person changes, God, what can you do in their life that will change them? If they can come into Wealthy Kingdom and say, I never made any more money, but man, my wife actually loves me now.
Yeah, and my children's floor is way up where my ceiling is, and who knows what they'll do. I mean, because it's not about us, Chris. In the long and short of it, you know, in the 80s, I fought my battle for purity. Now it's the 20s, and you know, I'm 67. I'll die at some point, right? So I'm just here for this period of time. But if I teach others well, and that knowledge enables them to rise above the corruption of this world and to live godly lives, then my children can do that even better than me.
Yeah.
Because they started at a higher place.
Yeah.
You know what? I hope my kids are better than me and are more famous than me and do have bigger impact than I do. And all those things that we think about, if we're doing our job right, it should move from glory to glory.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah. Fred, thank you.
No, I've had a great time.
Oh, this is so good to me.
Yeah.
Gonna be so good for y'all. I am at a loss for words. I've been convicted. I've been corrected. I've been inspired in this moment. Truly,
Nice.
as a man, for my son, for my wife.
Yeah, it's my job. I love you, and when you said yes for me to come, I was all yours.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought this. And it's coming at a really good time, even in my own life, where
Good.
I'm contemplating things and I'm saying, okay, you know, these things I'm thinking about with my son, and how do me and my wife get closer, and even just personally for myself, it's like, oh, there's a response to grace that even I have not had yet consistently in every aspect of my life, where I can say, I'm willing to do good. Like, this was worth that alone.
Good.
This was worth that
I'm
alone.
really
where
happy about
okay,
that.
God, search my heart,
Yep.
because something in my heart is not eager to do good.
Yep.
I-
Just go to Titus 2. It's in the 2nd chapter. You'll find it.
Titus.
And just meditate.
Wealthy Kingdom. We can't be Wealthy Kingdom with it. I keep saying I need to bring my Bible into these sessions, and I do. I need to. I don't know why I come into a podcast and I don't have my Bible. Titus 2.
Yep. At some point, you'll see it talking about grace and saying no to.
We're just going to start at verse 1, and we'll just go from there. If I have to read the whole thing, it's only 15 verses. Listen, the more you read the Bible, you'll increase in 15 verses. That's nothing. That's nothing. You'll increase your appetite to want to read. Titus chapter 2, starting at verse 1. But as for you, teach what accords with sound doctrine. Older men are to be sober-minded, dignified, self-controlled, sound in faith, in love, and in steadfastness. Older women likewise are to be reverent in behavior, not slanderers or slaves to much wine. They are to teach what is good, and so train the young women to love their husbands and children, to be self-controlled, pure, working at home, kind, and submissive to their own husbands, that the word of God may not be reviled. Likewise, urge the younger men to be self-controlled. Show yourself in all respects to be a model of good works, and in your teaching show integrity, dignity, and sound speech that cannot be condemned, so that an opponent may be put to shame, having nothing evil to say about us. Bondservants are to be submissive to their own masters in everything. They are to be well-pleasing, not argumentative, not pilfering, but showing all good faith, so that in everything that they may adorn the doctrine of God, our Savior. For the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation for all people, training us to renounce ungodliness and worldly passions, and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in the present age, waiting for our blessed hope, the appearing of the glory of our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ, whom gave himself for us to redeem us from all lawlessness and to purify for himself a people for his own possession, who are zealous for good works.
Yeah.
Declare these things, exhort and rebuke with all authority. Let no one disregard you. Titus chapter 2.
Great chapter, huh? Ends with that beautiful, our blessed hope.
Thank you, Fred.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. And we are definitely talking about this book. We are definitely talking about getting this to our men.
I just want to help, guys. I mean, the trouble with writing a book is not in writing the book. It's in getting people to know about the book. And you are God's gift to Mike and I and Brenda. We can help churches. We can help men.
Yeah.
They just have to know.
Yeah. We to lift the shame, get to work in changing that through Christ and watching them live in the freedom
Oh, yeah.
of not being held by that.
Freedom's good.
Oh,
Freedom's good.
yeah. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Chris.
Thank you.
Hope to see you again soon.
Yes, yes. Wealthy Kingdom. I don't even know. I wish you could feel. I hope you can. Spirit will. I hope you can feel what I feel in this moment. What I feel in this room. I hope you're feeling it in your car. I hope you are at work. Like I gotta go to my 15 so that they don't see me. Where's the Bible? Where's the Wealthy Kingdom? Listen, men, the men of Wealthy Kingdom. Like this is the call. This is the call to freedom. This is the call to Christ. This is the call to truly walk out kingdom principles. This is the call for you to say, no more shame, no more fear, no more running away from the true issues that are coming between you and God, you and your family, you and your children. Like, this is the call. And we can do it. And you're not going to have to do it by yourself. Like, we're here. We are, as a community, we're here to be, support for one another, to pray for one another, to teach, to preach, to bring correction and rebuke, but also to celebrate in that so that we can be the true men of God, the mighty men of God that he's called us to be for our families, for our businesses. We have an obligation to not just let any more time go by. This is my call to you to say, no, we're going to do it. We're going to do it together. And there's resources for you. We will be a resource for you. I say this coming out of conviction out of this podcast. Like, this isn't even like, I'm in it too. Together, we're in it, and we don't have to do it alone. And I hope that this podcast has helped you see that, okay, we can do it. There's resources, and we're going to go after it. And if you're a woman who's watching this, we're going to do this for you, for your marriages and for your sons and for your uncles and for your cousins, and also for the man that you want to eventually be married to. Because I truly believe that for some of you, if you're sitting here and you're like, I'm trying to find a godly man, give us some time. Give us some time. We're going to work on that man that doesn't know. And he's going to find freedom. And then you're going to be like, okay, that's the guy. That's the guy. I found my godly man. Because we're going to raise up some warriors for Christ that are going to run towards their problems and not run away from them. We're going to see victory. We're going to see victory. Wealthy Kingdom, I love you all. I hope that you are a part of the community. If you're watching this and you're not, let's get in. Let's talk about it. Let's get you into Wealthy Kingdom. It's free, so it's not going to cost you anything. But I want you in. I want you in. And I hope that you all enjoyed this episode. This won't be the last time. And you're going to see a lot more material coming out of this one because my heart is stirred right now for reaching men and watching them get to the work of God and to have godly families and godly businesses. So I hope you all will join us again for our next episode. Peace.